Twisted Colossus is a special roller coaster. It originally opened at Six Flags Magic Mountain back in 2015. On the day of its opening, it immediately became one of Six Flags Magic Mountain's best roller coasters, and for a park of Magic Mountain's size, that's really saying something. Of course, since this is an RMC coaster, this was a conversion of a former wood coaster, in this case, Colossus. This dueling Woody was a classic, originally opening in 1978 and closing in 2014, and it was loved by many. But after 35 years of wear and tear and the emergence of a new company called Rocky Mountain Construction a few years prior, they decided to give RMC the job with this dueling coaster, and they turned it into an excellent hybrid. I never rode the old Colossus, and I know there are park fans that miss it, but I don't think you can deny that Twisted Colossus is objectively the better ride. Despite the fact that this ride is drastically different than the old one, you can still obviously find it in the same section of the park. If you go into park and turn right, you'll find it in the Scream Punk section. As you might guess, this whole area has a very light steampunk theme. This is also where you can find Scream, the B&M Fourless coaster. Twisted Colossus should always run 3 trains. Emphasis in that statement is should. In fact, I think this park rarely runs 3 trains anymore. When I visited this past March, we never saw operating with more than 2 trains. This is kind of a bummer because in order to take advantage of that dueling feature to its fullest, you need to have 3 trains, 1 in the station and 2 on the track. That's honestly probably the biggest issue I have with Twisted Colossus. You'll probably duel at least 1 year lapse if there are 2 trains running at a time, but you're never going to duel both times if that's the case. I wish there was a way to fix this. Perhaps instead of slowing the train down on the second lift and allowing the train on the first lift to catch up, maybe you stop the train at the base of the second lift and then go up simultaneously. I'm not sure if there's really a solution here outside of just running 3 trains. Of course, the park's other dueling coaster that was added in 2020, West Coast Racers, has since fixed this problem. West Coast Racers accomplishes this by having a pit stop halfway through the ride. You sit in there while they load the other train, and when you're ready to go, they send you both out at the same time. But granted, when you have launches, it is a bit easier to do something like that. If you want to hear more about West Coast Racers, I already have a full separate review already published on this channel. Getting back to Twisted Colossus though, that's my biggest problem with the ride, and I really hope that they put some serious thought and effort into it to try to fix this in the future. When you get to the ride, you enter under a nice Twisted Colossus entrance sign. This leads you into a queue that has some theming, mostly just posters and a few steampunk related memorabilia. The theming is pretty on par with the other parts of the land, so it's okay at best. Now, Twisted Colossus is a ride that can definitely get lines on busy days. Because of this, I would recommend arriving at Twisted Colossus pretty early in the day, especially considering the fact that in my opinion, it's the park's best ride. Unless it's a super packed day, the first 90 minutes or so should have pretty manageable queue lines for Twisted Colossus. But after that, you're probably looking at a 30 to 60 minute wait most days. We talked about the 2 versus 3 trains item, but in terms of the dispatches themselves, they are decent. I feel like they're kind of hit and miss. I never saw them be painstakingly slow. Some ride-ops really want to get the train going so they can duel, and others just simply don't care as much. That said, the ones that do hustle stand out, and the operations do make a difference here. If the train isn't dispatched in the proper sequence and the proper time, then you might not get a duel, which is unfortunate. These are your classic RMC trains, 6 cars with 2 people across in 2 rows for a total of 24 riders. They also feature shin guards and the obnoxiously heavy lap bars. You start this coaster on the blue track. As we'll see, you get to go on both tracks in one cycle, which is pretty sweet. You take a left-hand turn out of the station to start. Then, in classic RMC fashion, you go through a couple bunny hops and off-axis hills before you go to your first lift hill. It's almost humorous because these actually give ejector airtime. This is a fun little beginning to the ride, and for first-time riders, it gives them an idea of what they're about to experience. Then you ascend your lift. 121 feet in the air is a pretty decent sized lift hill for the traditional roller coaster, but when it's set up against Goliath, it looks puny. When you reach the top, you crest over and drop 128 feet at an 80-degree angle. No matter where you're sitting, but in particular in the back, you will get excellent ejector airtime here, the first of many awesome airtime moments. I know it isn't beyond vertical or super tall, but I think in the coaster community, this is an underrated drop. It's just really solid. You barely get back down into your seat before you fly up again into a speed hill. This moment is less sustained, but it's powerful. Then comes maybe the best airtime moment, this camelback leading into the high 5. You feel it in any seat, but I think towards the front of the train, you really get to appreciate the full power of this moment. And because you have speed going into it, it makes it even more powerful. Next is the high 5. This is basically a pair of wave turns that butt up against each other. Since we're talking about the blue side right now, I think this is the slightly better version of this element. It feels a bit more natural, and you once again levitate out of your seat, though this time you don't get yanked out of it. This unique maneuver leads directly into a straight drop, piercing through a support structure. This is a great hand chopper and a great airtime moment. In my opinion, that's an advantage of a wood coaster, or in this case a wooden coaster structure. You get all those hand choppers. After this moment, you have another little speed hill. This one is less powerful, and then you fly into an awesome camelback that goes directly under the Top Gun stall that we'll talk about in a minute. Looking up and seeing the train flying above you while getting that much airtime is magical. The blue side then throws an inversion at you, a 0G roll. RMC does incredible 0G rolls, and this is another really good one. It's taken quick enough to where there isn't tons of hang time, but I love the whip here. This leads up into a small double up. After that step up, the blue finishes with one last off-axis hill and takes you into the second lift hill as the track color changes to green. As mentioned earlier, this lift hill takes a long time to get up. This is intentional. The idea is that the blue track can catch up and then you can both go at the same time on the first drop. And if the dispatches are timed up correctly, this actually works pretty well. It just takes a really long time to get up this lift. Even with sped up footage, you can see that it takes a couple of moments to get up to the top. When you do get up to the top though, you are treated with another fantastic first drop, 128 feet down at that 80-degree angle. You do have a tiny bit less speed pushing you into this drop, but it feels basically the same. You get ejected out of your seat, and the same can be said for both the speed hill and the following camelback. To avoid repetition, let's just say these are awesome airtime moments. Now the high five on the green side isn't bad by any means, but I will say it feels a little bit awkward. You're twisting left but have to flip around back right to face the blue track. It's not uncomfortable, but probably my least favorite part of the ride. You then go through a double down that doesn't provide crazy airtime, and then go into probably the best moment on the green side, the Top Gun stall. This is such a cool inversion. We talked about it earlier from the blue side's perspective where you can look up and see the train above you, but the green perspective is just as cool. You can look down and see the train underneath you. And besides the visuals, this is a 0G stall by Rocky Mountain Construction, so you know what that means. A whole lot of hang time. This is such a good out of your seat upside down moment. After you're upside down for a good couple of seconds, you go through an airtime hill underneath the blue side 0G roll. You do come out of your seat here, but in a ride with so much airtime, this moment wasn't particularly memorable. You then pop up into that double up that I mentioned earlier. To elaborate on this a bit more, you don't get tons of airtime here, just a quick pop on both hills. After another dip, you slide into the brakes, ending the 4,990 foot long coaster. This coaster has 60 seconds of prime ride time, which is pretty good, but obviously you're on the coaster for a lot longer than that because of the lift hills. This coaster having two lift hills is kind of a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it means you're on the coaster for longer, you get the dueling feature, and it extends the ride time. But on the other hand, it does kind of feel awkward from a pacing perspective. Just as the first side feels like it's really getting going, you hit the second lift hill, and just as the second side really feels like it's getting going, you hit the brakes. 30 seconds on each side is respectable, and it's a good thing that they have both tracks in one ride, because otherwise 30-second track would definitely feel like a short ride. But because of how it's set up, I think you really feel like you get your money's worth on Twisted Colossus. I never came off feeling cheated by the ride time. So let's start winding this down and give this coaster a final score. Twisted Colossus is an excellent coaster, and I said that from the very beginning. The mix of elements, airtime, hang time, whip, everything you could want in a coaster really, was done so well. The biggest issue is how this coaster is run. If you could get a guaranteed duel on every single ride, then I think it's a 10 out of 10. I really do. But because of that, I'm probably going to drop the rating a little bit. Now, this coaster is still really good even if you don't duel, but knowing that you could be dueling makes it not nearly as fun. But for Twisted Colossus' final score, let's give it a 9.5 out of 10. The problems I have with this coaster are really pretty small. It's near perfect, and I think even though Colossus was an absolute classic, they have a winner here in Twisted Colossus. It's Magic Mountain's best ride. So let me know down below, is Twisted Colossus the best ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain in your opinion? And if you enjoyed this review, I'd appreciate it if you considered giving this video a like or subscribing to the channel. But until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you then.